Great supervision really is the foundation of great ABA, but providing quality supervision takes time, structure, and energy that many of us BCBAs feel really stretched to give. That's where the right tools make all the difference. In this episode, we are talking about why skillful supervision matters, how the right ABA supervision resources can make the process smoother, and how our supervision resource package can save you time while raising the quality of the mentorship you provide. Hi, I'm Shira.
And I'm Shayna. We're behavior analysts who create weekly content about how to teach children with autism so that they make real progress. And we create shareable resources to make your job just a little easier. Today's topic is all about ABA supervision resources. And if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on new video releases.
When you think about any profession that you would go into, you go to school for a couple years, but that's really never enough. You never have, a doctor graduate and, perform his first surgery or her first surgery without doing an internship. The same thing with, a lawyer or even things like an engineer or a plumber or a builder. Like there's a lot of supervision and mentorship that needs to go into the practice behind the theory because you get the theory from the coursework, but that supervision really gives you that practice. And you need to practice under someone who has been doing this for longer than you so that you can make mistakes safely. But as the supervisors, how do we make sure that we're giving really good supervision so that our supervisees are learning through that supervision experience?
Can you imagine going into surgery for, I don't know, whatever, and the doctor says, well, this is my first day?
I just graduated.
No, no,
No,
thank you.
what not to say when you're a
Right?
teacher.
Seriously. Or a BCBA. Hey, this is my first day. You're my first client. Never done this before. Anyway, supervision matters. It really does. It really shapes that next generation of BCBAs. So we need to make sure that we're doing it properly. And we need to make this a priority and make it one of the most important parts of our work. And fortunately, we put clients first and it seems to be our first priority. But unfortunately, the supervision drops off, or it seems to sometimes. It's one of those balls that seems to get dropped if there's too many up in the air, right?
The hard part with supervision, and we're talking about BACB supervision, for BCBA candidates, people who've graduated and are getting those hours towards taking the exam. The challenge as a supervisor is it's hard. Not everybody's coming to the same place. They don't all have the same education, and we have other priorities. So it is a lot on us to think about how can we train them? What will this mentorship look like? At the same time, if you've gotten somebody who's a little bit on the weaker side, there's so much negative reinforcement in there to not tackle it and not it's a lot more work on our end to then train them up to the level, which hopefully our standards are high. We want them to be great BCBAs, not just okay. And that can really be challenging because it's a long process and there are a lot of competing contingencies for us as the supervisor and also for them as a supervisee that make this a really challenging relationship. So I just really want to acknowledge for all of you out there who are struggling with supervision, or a supervisee struggling with getting good supervision. Those are all really, really hard parts of this field. It is a part that I hope we figure out how to improve. But in the meantime, what can we do to provide quality supervision?
We think about the ripple effect too, right? If we do have poor supervisors, if you get poor supervision as a supervisee, it leads to a weaker practice and weaker client care. And, stronger supervision elevates that whole field. And that was actually one of the reasons that Shira and I developed
I
How
was
to
going to say that.
ABA.
Yeah.
Okay, I took your words.
No, we
Who's going to say it?
I want to say it. No, we were noticing that like we were so passionate about kids and clients getting good quality ABA, and the thing that felt like it was sometimes holding back from that was quality therapists and quality BCBAs. And so our mission was in trying to elevate the quality of ABA that our clients were getting was to educate and train more people.
Absolutely. And, that compassion and science, they go hand in hand in supervision, right? Trainees need to be modeling both of those, compassion and science. And that's where we've developed how to ABA, but that's also where just good, effective supervision comes in.
Right. So it's not just about them memorizing the technical terms or knowing the definitions. You can have on both sides, you could have a supervisee who is really good at technical terms and can spit back all of the parts of the textbook, but isn't really great with kids and can't really relate to the clients that they're given. And then you could also have some who are really amazing with the clients, but they can't really explain what reinforcement is or why that worked, although you see them practicing it. And those are both, parts that you need to incorporate. They're both important parts of becoming a BCBA. You need the knowledge and the practice. And so both of those have to be developed equally.
So let's talk about some challenges of supervision because honestly, as a BCBA myself and as somebody who has supervised lots of people, there are lots of challenges. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me, anyways, is all of those balls up in the air. We juggle so much on a regular basis. And, I always pride myself in saying the clients come first. And, I'm working with the clients and making sure that their skills progress. And, then I'm doing some parent coaching again to make sure the client's skills progress. But then I have to do assessments to make sure the client's skills progress. And then I have to train RBTs to make sure that client's skills progress. Where do I have time to train another clinical supervisor, another, BCBA in training? Like it's a lot. And then there's administrative tasks thrown on top of that as well. Oh, and then you're telling me that I have to be compassionate on top of all of that. Of course, I'm compassionate, but like I have to, like I can't just shoot off an email with 3 point form sentences. I actually have to compose it and like be friendly about it. Like it's a lot. And, someone said to me, that compassion needs to be put above productivity. And I absolutely agree with that. I want to be productive. I want to be productive, but we have to make sure that compassionate piece is in there. But I'm going to throw one more layer on there that we need to have that supervision and really great staff training overall, whether it's supervision of a BCBA or supervision of an RBT, that should be first and foremost, because if you don't have that supervision, all the client stuff is going to fail.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, often as BCBAs, we are overwhelmed. We don't really have time. And that could result in us not being as organized about our supervision and maybe only focusing on the task list, which again is great. We are supposed to focus on the task list, but some of that practical, real skill building isn't on the task list, or somebody can spit out the definition of a task list but not be able to show it. And we don't want to resort to just checking those off for our supervisee. We really want to be building skill. That could be really hard when you're overwhelmed and stressed as BCBA.
Or wait, squirrel. Squirrel. Have you ever done that? Like you're not prepared for a supervision session and then you just end up winging it and then you go off in like all these tangents and you just don't feel organized. That's another, reason for, why supervision can be so hard.
One of the challenges I find is everyone's coming from different backgrounds and from different programs and different degrees. And some people worked as in ABA before getting their master's or going for their BCBA. Some didn't, and this is brand new to them. And different programs have different requirements. And so I find that we're often trying to figure those pieces out with every supervisee, and then trying to supplement like what they probably should have learned in school, but either they didn't, or they don't remember it, or it wasn't taught properly. And there isn't really a process where you know that everybody's coming in at the same place.
We have another video on preparing for supervision, and it's episode 81. So go check that out as well.
So what should it look like? What
What
does
shouldn't it look like? Chasing squirrel.
considering all those, downsides, what should really good supervision look like? So being organized, I think, is really hard for me, which is part of the things I struggle with in supervision, is you need to really have structure to like assessments, to you have to have an agenda for the meetings, you need to have your contracts done, you need to have meetings and observations scheduled and done and followed up and notes, and that is really, really important. And it also requires time. And depending on where you're living, where you're working, what the process for billing for that time looks like can look different for some people. And if that's not paid time, that's even more challenging. So you really need to have a good structure of making this work.
I also think the intentional teaching, right? Like I said before, like we can't just wing it. So it's that structure, but it's even more than that, right? It's not just about, I'm going to teach you these technical skills that you need to know or what you've been learning in school or what's on the task list. But we also have to think about those ethics. And, that's on the task list too, like the ethical decision making. And that goes back to compassion. But it's more than that, right? The ethical decision making, there's the professionalism and there's those soft skills. And interestingly enough, when BCBAs are interviewed, in their first year, they say, what are you not prepared for? BCBAs are saying it's those soft skills. I didn't learn how to talk to parents. I didn't learn how to answer really tough questions. I didn't learn how to balance, my schedule with this and all the other side work that needs to be done that isn't defined at the beginning.
And one thing that I would really encourage everybody to do is have some system for accountability for your supervisee, because we're often very passionate about the field and very passionate about teaching and how exciting it is to be able to observe a session or practice doing an assessment. But if you find that your supervisee is really just not as excited about that, then you can't care more than they do about their supervision. And so having systems of accountability, what I'll often do is I'll have them schedule some of the meetings and I'll have them send follow-up notes, or I'll have them do some of the things that show that they are, accountable. They have to seek out opportunities, because I mean, it's a combination of both us providing opportunities as they come up, but we can't provide any and every opportunity. Sometimes we'll wait for the supervisee to seek those out, or find things that are available. And I think that that's really important, because it's going to burn you out as a supervisor if the supervisee isn't meeting you at least halfway. And having systems for understanding and having the conversations about when it's not working. It's in the contract, and it should be in your contract about those hard conversations. And we included it actually in our supervisor package, because it's so important to have those check-ins of like, is this working for you? Or what are you missing? And so I would really encourage good supervision to include those conversations as much as they are hard.
That's a really great idea to have supervisees write up some of the notes and seek out some other opportunities as well, because that also teaches initiative.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's really great. I'm like,
Mm.
let's take a note off there and do some of that. You mentioned the supervision resource package. We created something because again, it was driven by how do we make these supervision meetings more structured, more organized, and just more successful overall. So we created it with like busy BCBAs in mind. So it really is everything you need to structure supervision from day one. It includes a bunch of stuff. Should we just talk about what it includes? So the first thing it includes is a supervisor self-assessment. And, if you look at the BCBA code list or the ethics code, what we really need to do as supervisors is making sure that we are capable of providing supervision. So this self-assessment basically like gives us go, okay, yeah, we do have the competency to supervise at this particular time.
The next thing is a really great resource list. So these are links to everything a supervisee would need. So the task list, the experience standards, the eligibility requirements, all of these kind of like quick resources and information that you can assign to your supervisee to start reading.
Right, because you go to the BACB website and it does give you a lot of information on supervision, but I find there's links to different places in different areas and you've got to click through and it's a long time to get to what you
It's
need to
hard to
do.
navigate.
So this is like a one pager of here's a reading list, here's what to do. Actually, it's more than one page. It's there. And then it does have links to the websites for, the BCBA handbook and ethics code and that kind of thing.
And then we've given you a sample contract. So you are required, if you're providing BACB supervision, to have a contract with your supervisee. So we've included a sample contract that both of you need to sign. Both of you need to have copies of that. There's also includes a letter for if you need permission from employers or from parents. These are all in Word format. So if you need to edit them and personalize them, you can go ahead and do that.
We also have a BCBA candidate assessment. So not only does the supervisor have an assessment, the supervisee also has an assessment. And it's really about what I do with it is I have the supervisee complete the assessment, and it's really a baseline, right? So, where are you right now? And I can take a look at that and say, okay, if you feel like you're really competent in these areas, we're going to focus less on these areas and more on these other areas. And it really does include two different categories. It's the clinical scope, but it's also the professionalism piece of it as well.
Right, because part of what we're trying to build is, clinical judgment, and that comes with an awareness of our own skills and possibly our own weaknesses. And so trying to build that by them having them do it themselves is a really good way to start building that judgment. Oh,
I was going to say, there's also, the BACB task list assessment. It's based on the sixth edition task list, but it's different. So there's two different assessments that the supervisee is filling in. There's the task list assessment of like, okay, where do you lie on your understanding of the task list? But the other one is really about, where do you lie in terms of like, how comfortable do you feel with parent coaching? How comfortable do you feel with teaching these types of programs or with giving staff feedback, that kind of stuff? So it's the softer skills.
And then we also have something about practical skills. This is something that we developed about so many things that are on the task list are great and you need to know them, but they're not practical. But to actually practice as a BCBA, there are a lot of things that are not on the task list. And these are things like programming or behavior change interventions or doing school consultations. These are the kind of things that if your supervisee wants practice in, we can have a list of a way to assess them.
And it's really great because as a supervisor, you want to impart all this knowledge on your supervisee, but you don't know where to start. So by having the supervisee fill this out, it'll give you a nice starting point and it gives you a nice basis for discussion as well. So when you come to day one of the supervision, okay, it's day one, start with those assessments, right? You can say, okay, let's fill these out. This is what we're going to do today. And that might take you into a few supervision meetings to talk about these things and see where they're at. But really, you have to be prepared for your first day. So we've also given you like a day one list. So here's the recommendations for day one, which is the baseline stuff, but it's also some relationship development too, and just setting those expectations right from the beginning.
And then you'll find a meeting agenda. So like in each individual supervision meeting, what does a meeting look like? What should you cover? What should you review? And then what do those notes look like? So there's a template where you can document all of that so that you're not, starting from scratch every time you meet.
And that's super overwhelming. It's like, okay, what do I fill out today for that? And so we've got to document our meetings. Well, what does that documentation process look like? And how do we talk about when it's not working? So that's all included in there.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about that agenda meeting is that you really preempt some of the hard conversations by every time you're meeting, discussing, like, do I feel like this supervisee is ready? And it's not going to be a surprise, but if every time you meet, you're really having those conversations about level of readiness, that's a really good way to, put it into every conversation.
We've also included some ethical dilemmas. So when you're working with parents, things come up, right? So we've given you some sample ethical situations to review and to talk about. And there's questions in there, but there's also some answers. And again, there's not a one size fits all answer, but those answers are for the supervisor to discuss with the supervisee.
And we've found journal articles for you to assign to your supervisee. So these are our recommendations, and you can assign it to them, and they can fill out once they've read those assigned journal articles.
Included with this is a journal summary form. So if you're giving your supervisee a journal article to read, they can summarize that journal article. And I don't know how to summarize a journal article. I'm sure ChatGPT does, but in a way that is not AI generated, your supervisees can fill out a form. So it's a template for that.
And then an evaluation form. So for both parties, you can evaluate your supervisee and they'll evaluate you. And this is done about every 250 hours. So you could do this 8 times, up to 8 times in your supervision. And it should, like I was saying earlier, really generate discussion and conversation about what strengths and weaknesses are, what your supervisee might be struggling with, what you as a supervisor are struggling with, and how to tackle that. So these resources really are what we created out of things that we were struggling with. And you don't need to start from scratch. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with every new supervisee. And it really helps when we were saying there is no curriculum for supervision. There is no way to do this. Not everyone's starting at the same place. Now you can have some level of consistency and accountability and some way of tracking, like, where is everyone starting and how do we get them to end up in the same place?
Absolutely. It also promotes consistency and accountability. Imagine accountability. No, but that's huge, right? It's just, have things there. If there's any questions, we can go back to our notes and it's all there. It also builds trainee confidence. I can't imagine if I were a trainee and my supervisor was winging it or, filling things out haphazardly, like it gives me doubts on my supervisor's competence as well. So it really helps with that imposter syndrome as a supervisor, and it builds confidence in the trainee too. It also encourages collaboration and reflection, right? It's not just about checking off hours. Okay, I've done these hours, but it really makes those meetings that you're having more meaningful.
And while we totally understand the, short-term negative reinforcement involved in putting this to the side and not prioritizing it, we want you to think bigger because as a BCBA, every person you supervise is then going to go out into the field and carry that influence for better or worse into their own practice. And if they got good supervision, then that's, a whole bunch of clients who are now getting good quality ABA. And unfortunately, if it's not, a lot of people are going to struggle. And so we can really help band together and elevate the entire profession. Like that's a lot of impact that we can have. And by providing you guys with these tools, we're hoping to ensure that everybody gets better supervision and it's not just something that you dread anymore, but that you can find the rewarding parts of it in your role. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It is work because anything important does require work, but I want us all to acknowledge really how important it is for the future of ABA.
I just got shivers when you said that because I've worked with a lot of people. I've supervised a lot of people, and when I'm in the moment, I've got my blinders on. I'm like, okay, I have to supervise this one person, and this is this, and okay, I'll make the time and what have you. But really looking at that larger picture, it's so, so true. And I think our goal as BCBAs needs to be to raise the bar in our profession.
For more information on ABA supervision resources, click the link on or around this video or in the description to claim your supervision resource bundle. We also encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos and leave a like and comment below if you have further questions.